Welcome back, everyone, to Victoria 2, the Ottoman Empire. We have the rise of the Senussi. In the beginning, the first Senussi went to Mecca, where he joined Ahmad ibn Idris al-Fari, the head of the Khadirinites. Due to Wahhabi pressure, yeah, there's a lot of text. You should pause and read. But essentially, basically, the Senussi are this order that's in sort of southern Libya. It's in the desert regions. It's this religious military order that both causes a lot of issues for the Ottomans and also causes a lot of issues for, well, anyone that gets into Libya from about this time, you know, the 1860s, all the way to World War II. These people last for a long, long time. They were actually a bit of a pain in the ass for the Italian colonialists. Anyway, basically in game, it doesn't matter because the game does not know how to model guerrilla warfare, and so it is rather easy. It is rather easy to destroy the Senussi because they spawn with no army and they're in the middle of the desert, and so yeah, it's pretty much a no-brainer. And in the meantime, we are still trying to get ourselves. I love how Modena, that Austrian puppet, which is the place where I grew up in, has anarcho-liberals in government. That's always something that's kind of cool to see. Anyway, basically, I'm trying to get my influence to be higher, and as you can see, I'm putting a lot of points into places like Finland and Namiestnik Kavkaz, the Russian Caucasus puppet, because the idea behind that is that maybe I can put my influence in these places, which is going to make the Russians put their points in these places, which is going to lessen the amount of Russian points that are going in places that I care about, like Montenegro and Wallachia. Anyway, there's some weird wars going on in Yemen, and so it's easy enough we can take the Senussi province, which, by the way, previously used to be like a desert, you know, wasteland essentially. So I guess we get a relatively wasteland, unpopulated place to be our own, and we're also building up our army, which is important. But that's basically about it. Nothing really that interesting because we cannot really do anything yet. In the meantime, we're still focusing on getting our education efficiency up. 15% at this point of literacy and, you know, texts that are important to us. We also get dragoons, so some decent cavalry. And later on, we definitely want to go down the chemistry line because that's also where you get texts for oil. So yeah, that's quite important. But we get an awesome event, Colonial Incident. This is something that happens if you border, maybe if your colonies border another nation's colonies, but definitely if you border someone's colonies. And in this case, it's with the French, and the French somehow have a really pathetic army, 24 brigades. Right now, our brigade count, I can't really see with the preview window, which is pretty small, but it's something like 80. So another awesome thing is that it gives you a place in the Sun Casus Belli, which can be used to declare war for any colonial state. So that's a free casus belli, so no infamy paid for it, and we can even choose. We can even choose what state we take. Now we don't care about Senegal or the West Antilles or whatever. We care about Algeria. Algeria used to be a Ottoman protectorate, and there used to be something called the Barbary States there, and it's weird, it's complicated. Eventually, they got taken over by France. But, you know, we remember how once the Bey of Algiers used to pay tribute to the Porte or something. The Porte is, by the way, what the Ottoman Empire is called. It's called the Sublime Porte. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's supposedly the name of the Ottoman Empire. I'm not sure. And yeah, so this is a war that can be won, but of course, the French are allied to Russia. So we get a lovely war with Russia. Round 2. Ta-da! Fucking lovely, man. So, Russia round 2 is gonna be interesting because right now we still have, completely forgot that we still have an army in Simferopol, and that's a bit of an issue because as you can see it's only artillery. So, yes, this is not a good position to be in. I decide to try to do something. To try to reinforce them. Because what happens in Victoria 2 is that if you control a province, you can get your ships in there, right? And then you can just load up and go. But if you do not control the port, your guys have to walk the ships, which takes forever. Now, unfortunately, to walk off the ships also takes forever, and here comes a nasty Russian army. So, we can say goodbye to our good boys in Simferopol. However, there's also another issue. I decided to call in all my allies into this war, which was a mistake because it called in the Moldavian and Wallachian protectorates. So, as you can see, and also, wait, my guys actually get to land? That was a bad move, because that's gonna kill. Yeah, well, I mean, I do manage to get my actual army out, but the artillery stack is going to die. See, do not forget to move things back. When you're finished doing a war, move units back. I don't know, whatever. What's important though is that we can take Algiers rather easily. So I called in all my allies because of the United Kingdom, right? But I kind of did a dumb, because that called in Wallachia and Moldavia. And so, since Wallachia and Moldavia are in the war, the Russians have a very, very convenient way of coming in and killing us. So we have to mobilize, essentially, to get enough bodies into the fray to hold the line and prevent the Russians from storming into Constantinople. So that's basically my plan. It's to hold Tulcea and that other province whose name I can't read because there's too much shit in the way. That's gonna be dashed by something. So as you can see, like, the Russians right now are just completely obliterating our miners' defenses. Although they put up a decent fight in Isil, but yeah, there's no way that they can survive. Or sorry, not Isil, Yassi. So, the French may have 20 brigades, but the Russians have 160. And the province west of Tulcea is flatlands, so there's no defensive terrain for us to hold. And plus, you can see the Russians are just happily walking through Austria-Hungary. Now, that's something that, unfortunately, Victoria 2 is very, very, very prevalent. The AI really, really loves using neutral countries to flank you because, unlike in other Paradox games, there's no rule against, essentially, there's no rule against attacking from a neutral country into a country that you're at war with. So yeah, right now our army's in a pretty precarious spot. They're basically north of the Danube, kind of stuck because the Russians have moved west through neutral terrain. Essentially, if like World War I had played out in Victoria 2, the Belgians would have let the Germans move through and attack France, and there wouldn't have been any need for the Germans to kill the French, because getting military access is ridiculously easy in this game. Anyway, Tulcea is still a very good defensive province, so we can hold that. And my new plan is to rush in as many mobilized reinforcements as possible and essentially bludgeon the Russians. Now, one thing, and also obviously I've got some reinforcements coming from Libya by ship, which is very fast. Carlist Spain also is in the war and is gonna get punched in the face by France really hard. They're gonna heat the brunt of the French power. The French may have a very small standing army, but they do have a shitload of mobilized pops. So essentially, like, the Russians, yeah, sure, they may be moving in from the west and have a shitload of guys and all that, but as you can see, they're not really all that good at fighting, because they don't have really any tech, and plus, a lot of their units are gonna be mobilized anyway, so when we kill them, that's damaging their country. That's one thing about Victoria. In Victoria, wars matter a lot, and the AI manages to destroy itself because of that a lot of the times. If you kill people, it's not just going to damage the army, it's also going to damage the country itself. And so if you kill enough pops of a country, you're going to be severely damaging their economy. Now, in the early to mid game, this isn't going to happen in any like number large enough to do any significant long-term damage, especially because later on population growth gets very, very high. But later in the game, you can kill very good portions of a country. Not just through just open warfare, but also through making them rebel, because the more you're in a war, the more the war exhaustion is going to go up, and the more the war exhaustion is going to go up, the more rebellions are going to happen in a country, and rebellions later in the game can get quite big. So that's just another reason why I love Victoria too. Now, as you can see, these Russian armies out here, they aren't very big, and if you take a look at the composition, as you can see, they've only got infantry. Some of them have only got infantry, some of them have a little bit of artillery, but generally, we have balanced, or relatively balanced armies. We've also got armies with a ton of infantry, because they're mobilized, but we've also got armies with artillery. So, if we attack a flat land where there's only infantry, the result is absolutely massive. As you can see, that's also the 5 attack general, and that's just going to obliterate the Russian army that was flanking us in Kalarasi, and Braila is now empty. The British, in their infinite wisdom, have decided to make a Cubana landing. I guess this is the Cubana War. There's no Crimean War, but there's a Cubana War, which is the part of Russia, essentially, that's opposite Crimea, over there in the east side of the Black Sea. And because the Russians have had enough, because we just destroyed them so hard in battles and we gained a lot of war score, the British war leaders decide, hey, click the button and make peace. So we are officially at peace with the Russian Empire, and we have gained our Algeria, so that's quite good. In other news, we can get ourselves some landed voting, the greatest thing that has ever existed. So we're gonna have elections rather soon, and they shouldn't be no problem. Also, we're developing our economy quite nicely. We're the 11th industry now. Some factories are actually doing quite well, and you know, learning as I go what is good for the Ottomans. Just like always, just building some factories, seeing how they're profitable. Actually, it ends up working quite nicely because, again, as I said, the Ottomans have a lot of good resources, and so industrial expansion tends to work out quite well for them. And there we go, we changed to the limited constitutionalism, and we start our first elections. Now, I think there was something bugged with the game. I sure hope it's not like something that is broken because of the mod, because I'm using HFM. Because you'll see what I'm you'll see what my meaning is very, very soon. There's some weird stuff at play with the politics in this particular run of Victoria 2. Anyway, I'll not spoil it. It's gonna come later and it's gonna be a meme. But hey, who can say? And there we go. So the day of the big brain has arrived, and the socialists are in charge. I don't know how. Osmanli Ahali Firkasi. probably pronounced it incorrectly, but apparently so those are the policies, right? All great except for anti-military, which pisses me off, and free trade, which also pisses me off. Apparently this means Ottoman People's Party. I have no idea. This is not a real political organization. And, well, according to the very quick reading I've done on Wikipedia, which I know, cringe, but, you know, I don't have time to read a full history of the Ottoman Empire, unfortunately. Yeah, so apparently they got 52% of the vote, even though they had no support. Look, the ideology, that there's like 5% of people who are socialists. But see, that's the beauty of only landed voting. It does not matter. Like which ideology people see. Like I'm looking, there are a lot of liberals, there's a lot of conservatives. I don't know how they won, but big memes. So apparently, basically, well, first of all, the Ottomans didn't enter constitutionalism until like the 1870s, and even then, it didn't really pan out. There was basically a They rescinded the constitution, the Sultan did, and returned to absolute monarchy until basically the whole mess with the Young Turks, you know, in 1907, 1908, 1909, I don't remember the exact date. But we'll get to talk about that, I suppose, later, I hope. And that was the second constitutional era, while the other one was the first one. And in the first one, which is what we're talking about, there were no political parties, so I don't know where these parties are supposed to be coming from, but still, we're socialists, so why the fuck not? I swear, man, with Victoria 2, you just never know what happens. So anyways, until like the late 1900s, you have also, look at my glorious sphere of influence, Turan rises, our influence extends all the way into Central Asia, and that's the way it's supposed to be. That's what we will try to keep it. Anyways, oh no, not the natives. Basically until like the late the late 1900s, not like 1990, but obviously because the Ottoman Empire didn't exist, but like 1908, 1909, there were really no organized political parties, and well, guess what? That's not that different from like the rest of Europe. There was definitely more of a sense of political factionalism because of parliamentarism, and oh, we could get a humiliate casus belli on the Russian Empire, but we don't particularly care. But other than like socialist parties as we know them today didn't really exist in Europe at the time. It's really more of a thing that comes after mass politics and the end of World War I, really. It isn't, like organized political parties like we know them today are very, very new thing. Anyway, we get steel. Steel is awesome, because almost everything in the game requires steel. It's almost like something that is, that today would be called capital goods, which means that it's like a type of good that is required to make other goods. And so, since it is needed for like pretty much everything, I like to spam it. And plus, even if the steel industry doesn't end up being too profitable, it's always useful to your country because you're always going to be building things with steel. So even it is worth having around, even if you're not really selling it to anyone. And explosives, that's also another pretty important tech because, like for example, if you want to build artillery pieces, you need explosives. Anyways, look at those, 10 million people. I think that actually means that we have 30 million people in our empire because I think Victoria 2 counts 1 unit of population, which is supposed to be a family unit, so I think 3 people, maybe 4. Some people say 4, some people say 3, but you know, we're big. We have a lot of people. These Russians are being annoying in our sphere of influence, and we get the Great Cretan Revolution. Yes, it's apparently pronounced Cretan, and I did not bother to read that one bit because I don't give a shit. It's Crete. Literally, the only thing that I'm gonna do is get on a boat and go annex Crete. Like, it's not it's not something I'm particularly too concerned about. Although it's really cute to have Crete as a tag. I think that Crete is quite cool. And as you can see, they have a nice Greek flag because, you know, they're Greeks. And that's the thing that I'm talking about with, like, Greece having the possibility to expand very, very, you know, far for events. I'm guessing that if Greece became independent and, you know, strong, they could probably achieve enosis or unity, which is what Greece was trying to do in the Mediterranean from, well, independence in the 1820s all the way to, I suppose, the 1980s. Yeah, it was kind of a long process. And there's also the Rashidi Civil War, which is when essentially, well, the Saudis in Nejd are trying to take over a place in the sun. Oh, Messier Splenda. I suppose that's pretty good. Prestige is always nice. Are gonna try to take over Al-Rashid, which is the rival emirate, I suppose, on the Arabian Peninsula. And I might as well back one of them. But, you know, I don't particularly prefer either one coming out on top. I just want the region for myself. If just in influence, it's not worth, you know, the infamy to take over personally, and it's just a box of sand and desert, so I don't particularly care. And finally, we're starting to remove the Russians from some of our protectorates. Also, we're influencing Xinjiang, because why the hell not? Turkic Union 101. Although, well, the ruling people in Xinjiang are not Turkic, they're Chinese, but there's a ton of Turks, or Turkic people over there. And we're discredited, obviously, but it doesn't matter. Artillery factories, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We're gonna start to get some boom booms rolling. And there we are, War of Russian control over the Khanate of Khiva. So, here comes Russia, round 3. It's not even funny. I hate these guys. So, essentially, Russia wants Central Asia. As we talked about the whole Great Game stuff. Russia also wanted control over the Central Asian trade networks at about this time. And there goes Crete. So, no more enosis for you. The Greeks scattered across the Mediterranean belong to only one ruler, and that is the Sultan. But basically, yeah, like, around this time, Russia was trying to get themselves a bit of a slice of essentially the ancient Silk Road, except different, because it wasn't, you know, the 13th century anymore, but that essentially meant encroaching onto... See, Khiva, the brown country there, is actually mostly desert. But if you go farther east, towards where essentially modern Tajikistan is, you have essentially fertile oases and trading towns that basically, you know, sit on trade networks that go from China all the way to Persia. And Sweden decides to invade Åland Island, because why not? Or Åland Island? Yeah, I think Åland Islands or something like that. Anyway, basically, to secure that's obviously valuable in and of itself, because, you know, you're after taxes from the trade and all that. But to secure that, you also have to take over all the shitty desert to the west. And also, it was useful for the Russians to head down there because, of course, as you can see, there's Iran down there, right? And there's those mountains in Khorasan, which is the region between Iran and Central Asia, that are basically necessary for defense. Otherwise, it's just a flat plain for, you know, tens of thousands of square miles. Anyway, it's the Russians coming into Tulseya yet again. You'll see a hell of a lot of this in the future. Anyway, we just thrashed them really hard. which was quite lucky this time. No trouble. I didn't forget any units randomly in the Black Sea, so that's quite nice.